Chapter 4. Tides of Change. "Where do you think he might be going?" Johnny asks, and Madison thinks to herself, then looks at Reed as she says, "He's going to Debbie." Reed looks at Madison before nodding. "Right, we need to find him, until we sort out what's going on with us," Reed said, but Victor shows up asking, "What is going on? What happened in here?" And everyone turns to face him, but Susan walks over. "Victor, are you feeling all right?" Susan asks, and Victor responds with, "I am fine, just a few scrapes. That is all." Before looking over to Reed as he speaks up, "Ben did this. He's had some kind of reaction to the exposure of the cloud." And Victor looks at them as Susan follows it up with, "We all have, different symptoms." While Reed and Susan are talking to Victor, Madison starts to argue with Johnny. "I'm not going to ask you again. Go change right now," Madison says as she looks at Johnny before grabbing him by the ear and drags him to his room and pushes him inside. Before they left, Susan and Reed looked at them before looking at each other. "Don't come back out until you're dressed," Madison says, and gives Johnny a death stare as he said, "You're not my mother," which made Johnny backpedal. "Okay, I am sorry," Johnny says before starting to get dressed as he mumbles under his breath after Madison left. After walking back to Reed and Susan, Madison notices Victor went, and she looks at them. "What are we going to do?" Madison asks, and Reed answers, "We're going to find him," as he put his hand on Madison's shoulders to reassure her, and Madison nods. "So, let's not waste any more time and go," Madison says, and she sees Johnny walking back into the room with his arms up, like, "How's this?" And Madison smirks before saying, "Good boy." Then her, Johnny, Reed, and Susan went out to look for Ben. After walking out, Madison notices Reed calling a taxi, and everyone gets in like Madison is at the back with Reed and Susan. Meanwhile, Johnny is at the front of the taxi. "I'm worried about Ben. What if his powers are bad?" Madison says as she sees the driver start to drive off, but she gives Johnny a death stare as he said something mean about him, which made Johnny stop laughing once he sees the stare, and looks away. As they arrive on the bridge, they spot the commotion. Madison was the first one to get out of the taxi, and she looks around for a possible way to get to Ben. "What are we going to do now?" Susan asks as she looks at Johnny, Reed, and Madison, which Reed replies with, "We're going to get past those guys," which Madison thought of an idea. "We need a distraction away from the crash," Madison says as she looks at them, and Susan looks at Madison before saying, "What distraction?" which Madison smirks at as she says, "A fish kind," which made Johnny, Reed, and Susan look at her confused, before Madison walks over to the edge of the bridge. Madison breathes in and out to calm her nerves before jumping into the ocean and mutters, "Come on, work," before her powers start to work, and she feels herself hitting the water and looks down at her feet and notices it's slowly turning into a mermaid tail before she swims up and looks at Johnny as he sees her. "Holy shit," Johnny says as he sees her in her mermaid form before yelling at the pedestrians, "Hey, I just spotted a real mermaid, right here," which everyone besides from Reed and Susan looks over and sees Madison as a mermaid. Johnny, Reed, and Susan uses the opportunity to get to Ben, which Madison sees, and she dives into the ocean again, and she looks for a place to turn back into a human. She notices a fire truck on its way, and she sees it crashing, and she sees one of the firemen fall out, and Madison swam back over to the guy and drags him onto the shore, and she notices her tail turning back into human feet, and she watches her friends help save other people before a medic scares her as the medic picks up the fireman and carries him to the ambulance. Madison thinks for a moment before making her way back to the others, and she sees the crowd cheering for Ben, but she notices the awkwardness she knows about, and she walks over to him and hugs him. Madison let him go, and notices Debbie out of the corner of her eye. Then she looks at Ben, who walked over, but Debbie put her hand up to stop him before removing the ring, putting it on the floor, and walking off. "Poor Ben," Madison says to herself as she feels bad for him as Ben went over to pick up the ring. After struggling, Reed walks over to pick up the ring and passes it over to him. "I swear to you, I would do everything in my power until there's not a breath left in me. You're going to be Ben again," Reed says as he touches his shoulders. Madison walks over to him and touches the other shoulder. "And I'll help the best I can, Benny," Madison says as she smiles softly, which made Ben pull her into a side hug as she giggles. After a while, the medics told them to go into the camp, and they walked in. Everyone is now scattered all over the place, and Madison looks over to Ben, who is looking at his ring, but Johnny speaks up. "Where are your ears?" which made Ben look at him, and Madison spoke up. "Not now, Johnny, he doesn't need this right now," which Johnny looks at her and notices her serious face, and he nods before a medic walks back into the camp. "There are some folks outside that want to talk to you," the medic says to Reed, and Reed replies with, "We're not going public with this, we're scientists, not celebrities." But the medic days, "It's too late, son, look," as he shows everyone the footage of the bridge, which Johnny exclaims, "Cool," before trying to leave. But Susan stops him, but Johnny brushes it off and leaves, which make Madison shake her head. "This man-child will never learn," Madison mutters to herself before following Reed and Susan outside to stop Johnny. "Johnny!" Susan yells at him as he stops near the paparazzi. The chief asks, "Which one of you is the leader?" Which Johnny responds, "That would be me." Which the chief looks at him for a moment before saying, "No, seriously," which caused Madison to clean her throat to stop herself from laughing, and has her hand near her mouth to hide the fact that she's smiling as she sees Johnny's face. "Okay, son, you're on," the chief says to Reed, and he hesitates before saying, During our recent mission to the Von Doom space station, we were exposed to as yet unidentified radioactive energy, and the reporters asks a million of questions about them, but Susan steps in saying, "No, actually, we do not know much more than you do at this point." And the other reporter asks, "Symptoms? Is this some kind of disease?" Which Johnny steps in saying, "No. No, it is not a disease. If having special powers is a disease, then yes, we got it bad." One of the reporters says, "That thing doesn't look fantastic," which causes both Madison and Ben to step forward, but Reed stops them by saying, "Ben Grimm is a genuine American hero," and Madison adds on, "And if you guys don't like that, you'll have to answer to me." Then she death stares Johnny as he replies with, "What they mean is every team needs a mascot. A new day is dawning, the day of the Fantastic Five." Reed finishes the interview with the reporters and walks off with the others. Chapter 5. The Truth About Madison. After a while, they arrive at the Baxter building and the front man asks, "Is all that for you, Dr. Richards?" Which Reed sighs and shrugs his shoulders as he replies, "I'm afraid so." Then they all walk over to the lift. Of course, Madison is staying quiet as she allows everyone else to talk, and everyone notices that the elevator isn't going up, and Johnny comes out with, "Either we're moving fast or not at all." Then the elevator says, "Exceeded maximum weight," and everyone looks at Ben, and Ben says, "I'll take the stairs," before walking out, but Madison follows. "I'll walk with you, Benny," Madison says as she smiles, before walking over to the doors for the stairs and walks up them as she chats with Ben. And after a while, they arrive at Reed's apartment just as Victor leaves. "What the fuck is that all about?" Madison asks as she looks over to Reed, and Reed looks at her and reassures her, "Nothing important, Maddie." He gives her a smile, and Madison looks at him for a moment, then smiles back. During the experiments, Susan notices that Reed is not experimenting with Madison on her powers and asks, "Why are you not doing this to Madison?" Which made Reed stop what he was doing, then sighs before looking at her. "Promise you will not tell Johnny?" "I get the feeling he'll only like her for what she is," Reed asks, and Susan nods as she says, "I promise." Then Reed hesitates again before telling her this. Madison didn't get her powers from the cosmic storm like us. She was born with it, which made Susan more confused. "Wait, how?" Susan asks. Then Reed reaches over to grab the file of Madison and passes it over to her. Susan starts to read the file, and her eyes widened as she reads in bold letters, "Madison Hunter, birth date August 2005, species, mutant, level 6. Susan puts down the file, and she looks at Reed, and Reed nods. Her mother was a level 5 mutant and a level 4. Her parents were Scott Summers and Jean Grey, Reed explains, and Susan looks shocked as she says, "The Scott and Jean? From Johnny's comics?" Reed nods again as he replies, "Yeah, Cyclops and Phoenix. Madison's not just powerful, she is legacy." "Why is she in this universe, not in theirs?" Susan asked, and Reed hesitates for a moment before replying with, "Jean was scared that the Dark Phoenix will hurt her, and she thought that Madison would be safe here where the Dark Phoenix can't touch her." Susan stands up for a moment as she is processing everything. Then she realized that the gift she got from Madison was not from the stores, like Build-A-Bear. She created the teddy bear from her powers, and she never realized. Chapter 6. Skating on Thin Ice. "Hey guys, we have a serious problem," Johnny says as he walked over to them, not knowing about Madison as his shirt is now covered in holes, and Reed and Susan looks at him before Reed starts to do more experiments. After a while, Reed gathers everyone around and tells them our uniform was exposed to the storm, like us, so they can transform like us, becoming invisible, changing size on demand, or remaining impervious to flames. Ben does a little chuckle as he says, "You guys look like an 80s rock band." But Susan thinks for a moment, then says, "You know, Ben, this material stretches. I'm sure I can figure out a way to make it fit." But Ben shuts it down. "I love this costume. They're missing something, though. Needs like spice," Johnny says. But Reed cuts him by saying, "They're not costumes." And Susan adds on, "You can't use your powers in public, Johnny." But Ben looks around as he notices Madison isn't in the same room as them, and he speaks up, "Guys, you do realize Madison isn't here, right?" And Reed looks over to Ben before looking all over the place. Meanwhile, with Madison, she is at the ice skating rink, and she changes her shoes into skates, and she carefully goes onto the ice, and she starts to skate and dance. Besides Form staying with Reed, it was her way of calming herself down. Madison notices her powers are making the ice scraps float into the air, and she smiles as she continues to skate. After a while, Madison goes to one of the benches to take off her skates. Then she hears people outside and she puts her skates in her bag and puts it on her shoulders before leaving. Back to the others, Reed is slightly panicking. "How did she leave? She hates being on her own," Reed says, and Susan stops him and says, "Maybe she wanted to do something else and didn't want to bother you while you were working." As Susan said that Madison walks into the room after putting down her bag on the couch. "I scared Reed again, didn't I?" Madison quietly says, and Reed looks over to her before pulling her close and hugs her. "You did scare the hell out of me," Reed says, and Madison bites her lips before saying, "Sorry, Reed. I was just at the ice skating rink," which Reed looks at her and he nods, knowing it is her favorite thing to do. "So, how are you going to cure us, Reed?" Ben asks, wondering, and Reed looks over to him before grabbing a chart and replies, "I'm going to build a machine to recreate the storm. The cosmic rays will travel from this generator to this chamber." And Johnny asks, "What, no pop-ups?" And Madison and Susan looks over to him before Reed continues, "If I can reverse the wave signal and Ben finishes it off, it will return us back to normal." And Reed smiles as he nods. "Right, but what are the risks?" Susan asked, and Reed looks at her before replying, "Even the small miscalculation could increase our symptoms exponentially, or perhaps even kill us." After Johnny said something, Susan pulls Reed to another room. "What about Madison? Her powers will stay while we'll be normal." Susan asks quietly to him, and Reed looks at her before replying quietly, "I don't know." Reed pinches the bridge of his nose as he sighs, and he looks over to Madison, who is laughing with Ben, trying to cheer him up. After a couple of weeks, Reed managed to build the machine with a couple of help. Meanwhile, Madison was in her room reading some of her books. Susan and Ben is helping Reed. Meanwhile, Johnny manages to leave the building to go to a dirt bike competition. Then Madison came down and helped Reed, Ben, and Susan. "He didn't," Susan says as her, Madison, Ben, and Reed watches from the TV. "Oh, yes he did. Flame Boy never listens," Ben says as he sits down, and Madison says quiet as she knows that she snuck away to do ice skating. "What did he do to his uniform?" Susan asks, and Reed looks down and notices that Johnny did it to all their uniforms. "Guys, if we are going to be mad at Johnny for sneaking out, you should be mad at me for doing the same. I mean, I did technically scare Reed by doing so." Reed looks over to Madison, then at Susan and Ben. "She's not wrong," Reed says, but Johnny said something that made Ben say, "Okay, now I'm going to kill him," which Madison mutters, "Okay, I would never do that," before following Ben. Everyone arrives at the arena where the competition is held, and Ben looked at Johnny's car, then grabs it and crumbles it like paper before throwing it over to Johnny. "You think that's funny, Pebbles?" Johnny says as he looks over to Ben as Ben walks over. "Johnny, you gave us names? You do not think. So now you are the face of the Fantastic Five?" Susan asks, but Ben says, "A face that's about to be broken." Then everyone starts to argue. Besides Madison, then she steps in front of Ben and Johnny and yells, "Enough!" as the sonic boom came out of her hands, making Johnny and Ben fly the opposite way of each other. "Both of you pack it in and act like adults, or I'll start acting like your mothers and ground you," Madison says, at Ben and Johnny not caring about the onlookers. Then she walks off to calm herself down. Reed just looks at Johnny shaking his head before following Madison back to the building.